All right, guys. So this is the round 2 to the Andrew Tate and Piers Morgan conversation. It's called Piers Morgan Takes on Andrew again. Full interview part 2. Now, here's one thing I need to check really quick. I watched the interview last time, but apparently I didn't watch the actual interview. Apparently, I watched an edited down version that cut out some of like the really cheesy tactics that Piers Morgan operated with. Didn't even realize it till a period of time later. I was actually rather frustrated that he would even do that. He left the full one up and then he edited it down and re-uploaded it. Like kind of it's a really shady tactic. So I'll have to apologize for that. There's really nothing I could have done about it. It looks like this is the conversation. This is it. Unless there's a live, I don't know. So let's just watch this and let's hope that he didn't scam us again.
And welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Have you ever heard of Mr. Beast? What about PewDiePie?
No, who's
How
that?
about Keemstar, Logan Paul, Jake Paul?
Who's
The
Mr.
answer might
Beast?
well be no. You haven't heard of them. But if you've got kids,
Okay.
you will definitely have heard of them. And they
Maybe.
most certainly have. They're just a tiny handful of the legions of digital personalities whose videos are viewed by literally billions of young people across the world. Their endorsements are worth
Billions. Maybe not billions, but there's a lot of them.
millions in sales. Their opinions can instantly reshape conversations in schools, universities, and across social media. They're more influential
For sure, man. They definitely, and it's unfortunate that a lot of them aren't particularly mature and they're not pushing a particularly positive message. So,
than most musicians, soap stars, sports stars, columnists, lawmakers.
Hey, porn
But
stars.
unlike those power brokers of the past, the politicians and cultural stars who could set the
do a
social
bullshit
agenda,
dungeon.
these people seem to exist in a parallel universe. Their views go largely unchallenged, shared only as bite-sized clips. Their digital businesses often operate beyond the scrutiny of normal journalists and even regulators. They wield massive influence over young.
that's true, man. It's unfortunate though because this gets into a conversation about journalistic integrity. And the reality is, whether you like it or not, like actual verified journalists that go to school for their reporting are more integral, or rather, they have more integrity than other people. The problem is that because they'll use, it doesn't mean that they have really positive integrity. It doesn't mean that they're always speaking facts. There's a lot of narratives getting run from different people, very disingenuous ways, and it causes people to be very turned off and get turned on to alternative like media sources or information sources, and they think that because they're anti-mainstream that they somehow it's like correct when it's not. And it's really contributing to like a greater issue when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I don't know if Pierce is necessarily a positive. Certainly feel a little cheated after I watched that one interview with Andrew Tate and he completely edited down like 15 minutes out of it. That I think was very important. I think it was a moment where he tried to blame Andrew Tate for a young girl having like a very heavy mental health struggle, and when it was very clear that it wasn't Andrew Tate's fault. So
young people, and they're restricted only by the ever-changing whims of big tech companies. It makes no more sense than senators or secretaries of state simply never appearing on television. Well, my guest tonight is a perfect case in point, an example of both enormous digital conquest and the risks that come with it. He's Andrew Tate. His last interview with me has so far been viewed over 8 million times on YouTube alone,
Whoa.
17 million times across all platforms, which is staggering for someone who perhaps you're watching and thinking, who is Andrew Tate? It was a robust exchange.
Top G.
And Andrew Tate was here because he'd effectively been kicked off the mainstream internet for...
Well, Andrew Tate looks very angry right now. I guess he's in for a show here, huh?
supposed misogyny. His tirades against women were viewed literally billions of times. Well, the first time around, I wanted to find out if he deserved to be banned and if he'd ever actually crossed a line from shocking opinions to genuine hate speech.
I mean, that gets into a conversation about how much you think we should censor. I don't think he should have been banned. I think we can critically engage with these conversations, and it makes it a little easier rather than contributing to like the martyrdom aspect of like now Andrew Tate's based and now he's banned, and like that's because they're trying to hide something that he's saying. He's speaking facts, and like I don't think that those things are true. It's just a lazy way to engage with things that people disagree with. I think that's the bigger problem. Yeah, that's more than anything else.
Or if he just didn't fit the ideal model of the platforms that censored him. Let's go through some.
Sure.
Right? Do you think women are the property of men?
No, the point I was making.
Why have you said they are?
Because I made a religious point.
What's happening? Oh, this is a bit from his other original conversation. Okay.
Authority implies that you have the ability to control someone.
No, authority implies I have the moral right to sit and say that that's an irresponsible thing to do, and I'm responsible for
That's not what authority means. I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to point out that's not what authority means.
If someone gives, a person can give
Voluntary authority is not authority.
No, but that's the point. If
It's
a
not.
woman, Piers.
Andrew, it's not.
And this is the thing that's interesting, Piers. Please let me finish.
You're behaving like a politician. But hang on. You could say I'm interrupting.
You do.
But you're answering a different question to the one I asked you.
Fine.
No, you're weaponizing the weaponizing.
This clip doesn't make Piers look particularly good here. I feel like it just makes him come off as like abrasive, unless that's how he's trying to appear. But okay.
This doesn't
problem.
exist.
No problem. If someone comes to me and says I'm clinically depressed or I feel very, very sad, I would say the first thing you need to do is stop accepting the identity of a clinically depressed person. Stop accepting you have no control over this.
Andrew, you're simply wrong.
He has a good overall point, though. Like, I don't think it's particularly understanding of mental health issues, but the reality is that every single person in the entire world can identify with some form of oppression in some capacity. Some people, obviously, more than others. I wouldn't say I'm even close to somebody who can identify with any crazy oppression, but like, for instance, I come from a single-parent household. You know, you could identify with that oppression. I have ADHD, I have OCD, I'm dyslexic. These are forms of like oppression that I could associate with. The thing is that there's also an association you could have with it in too much of a degree. There's a difference between acknowledging an oppression that you have versus having an oppressed mentality. Like Dave Chappelle said it best when he was talking about like an anecdote with his father, where his father said, "You're not poor, you're broke. Poor is a mindset. Broke is just a state of being, basically." And there is a level of truth to it. That doesn't mean that you'll be able to magically cure depression without, magically, woohoo, but if you lean too much into that excuse, like it's not going to be positive for your mental health. There is something to be said about overcoming, and some people have a harder time than others because they have significantly more issues. I get that, and more difficult issues and more difficult forms of oppression to associate with. But fundamentally speaking, man, it's good. Like there is a mentality associated with it, and if you can rise above the mentality, you should try to do that, right?
If that's what you believe, Piers,
That's what I believe.
I don't believe in things that take power away.
There is not an eminent doctor in the world
Piers,
that would agree with you.
Piers,
Do you think you know more than doctors?
I can't become clinically depressed
Why do you know?
because I don't believe in it.
It's a lively stuff. I also wasn't sure if I should be interviewing him at all. If he was so unpleasant, as so many people said, well, why extend his profile and give him a platform? But the fact is that ship had already...
Well, for views. I mean, like, I don't know if I necessarily think that Piers is... I don't know if Piers is having people on for like a nuanced conversation, or if he's having people on so that he can get like some nice virtuous dunk points. I don't know.
Every teenager in the country knows Andrew Tate. It's just a lot of the parents who don't. And since that interview, Andrew has been returned to Twitter. His new owner, Elon Musk, is determined to protect free speech online. Many young people, especially boys, have literally stopped me on the street since that first interview to ask me about Andrew Tate. I've been staggered, honestly, by the response that I've had. What does it say about society that people like Andrew Tate can reach so many more people than conventional stars or journalists even? Who gets to decide where the line is and whether people like Andrew Tate cross it? Are they part of a poorly understood movement that panders to teenage rebellion like punk rock or pornography? Or are we exposing young people to new and damaging experiences we often don't see and don't understand?
I think that like nobody's done a good job at looking at Andrew Tate and being like, hey, I have fundamental issues with some of the stuff that you're talking about when it comes to male advocacy. There's some good stuff, like that whole mental health thing that he ran is not a bad advocacy point about trying to take hold of your perception and of the world and your depressed thoughts and overcoming them in some capacity. There's probably some good like stuff that you could pick up from Andrew Tate that might like help you as a person. But fundamentally, I think that when it comes to some of like the more sexist ideologies, the way of treating women, from what I've seen, his advocacy for men seems to be centralized more around breaking down women than building up men. He has some regressive thoughts that I think are relatively like generally sexist, but I will say he seems like a genuine guy. But nobody's really countered that. We don't really have anybody like countering what he's saying in a reasonable way. It's mostly just people like screaming misogyny and not being like, hey, listen, like I have a problem with this. I don't think that you're having a good example for young men when you go around talking about how like it's more okay for a guy to cheat on like a woman and things of this nature. I don't think that this sets young men up for respect. I don't think that you're teaching respect when you're constantly dunking on women. I like to make jokes too, but it's very clear that like I'm just making jokes and I don't actually believe these things. It's just like good to have like that positive outlook, and it feels like a lot of this stuff is disrespectful towards women, and he's gotten that feedback, and I think that he probably doesn't think it's disrespectful towards women. Generalizing women is still like one thing, and I guess nobody's made him understand that it is, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. But, I don't know. I don't think that Piers has necessarily helped the conversation. I think if anything, people look at him and go like, Piers, you kind of brought him in here to virtue signal over him. But,
it's a whole new world. There are more questions about it than answers. And we're not going to answer them by pretending it doesn't exist. Well, Andrew Tate joins me again now. Andrew, good to see you.
Salam alaikum, Piers.
Good to see
you. He's become very religious. I haven't really kept up with Tate, so I can't speak too much. Fundamentally speaking, religion can be a very positive thing for people and help a lot to ground them morally and mentally. And so maybe he's very religious. Maybe he's more into like the dedication to like friends and family and house and home and respecting women. Like, listen, religion can absolutely harbor some very sexist viewpoints when it comes to women. Let's not pretend that it can't. because it absolutely has, does, and can. But there are some religious people, like I have, like my buddy Curly Daddy, who looks at it more when it comes to like, oh, I believe men should be the head of the household. Okay, but he doesn't look at it as if men are better. It's more that men are serving the household, and like, you know what I mean. Everybody's equal; they just have different roles. So I can respect something like that potentially.
Genuinely been amazed by the reaction I've had in the streets, not just here.
Mean
I went
streets.
to Qatar for the World Cup, had the same thing there. A lot of people coming up about Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously, but also a lot of people coming up about you. And they were almost exclusively men, young men, who genuinely see you as a role model, as somebody who inspires them, as somebody they want to be like. Yep. So it made me think. The first interview you had was quite combative. The second time, a short interview, less so. I want to try and work out in this one who you are, because it struck me as extraordinary that Google this week revealed some stats for the year. The #1 person whose name followed people Google searching who is in 2022 was Andrew Tate.
Andrew Tungus.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable. I think there's a whole swath of the population, especially young men, that feel disenfranchised. They feel disenfranchised with the media machine and the things they're supposed to believe. They don't feel an affinity with the educational systems or the culture.
Yes,
and they look at a person like me who stands up and says the things that many young men think. I haven't put a magic spell on the world.
I fundamentally agree with what he's saying about how young men are feeling beat down by the system, basically. And, you know, part of this, there's a lot of issues here. I think that there's a lot of issues that men deal with, especially when it comes to providing for house and home, right? That it's just there's not as much opportunity for work. You have an education system that pushes people towards doing what makes them happy rather than actually giving them fulfilling jobs. You don't have to love what you do to be happy. Would you like? You know how ridiculous the advice that was to me, where it's like, oh, what do you want? I'm 18 or 17. You know, you're 17 years old, and they're like, hey, what's your dream? Give me some options, motherfucker. Some people might know, but not everybody knows what they want to do. You know, give me some options. If they told me, oh, maybe you should be HVAC or a mechanic or go into computer science, better guidance. Instead, it's like, nah, just go to college, waste your money, blah, blah, blah. And then you're told to go through school, get good grades, go to college, spend your money, blah, 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 even if you don't know what you want to do, and everything will work out. And then guess what? It doesn't fucking work out. And then people are really frustrated by this. And considering young men are expected to have a more expectation of them to succeed in their shit and like provide, all of a sudden this like it's frustrating for young men. Like, I don't know what you want me to tell you. It's definitely true. It's a real thing, man. And we're not giving that good advice to people. And it's frustrating. I think a big issue too is dynamics between men and women. I don't know if they're a huge issue. I feel like a big issue is just fatherless children. We don't have a lot of strong men in their homes. Of course, that doesn't mean that women are perfect, but you have more women taking care of their kids than men. It's a problem. I understand that the custody court might favor women, but the reality is you have more fathers that aren't even in our kids' lives than mothers that aren't even in their kids' lives. It's a father's job to teach men how to be men and to teach women how to be treated by men, teach their sons to be men and their daughters how to be treated by men. And, mother, same in the reverse, teach women their daughters to be women and their sons how to be treated by women. And I feel like, with lack of a father, there's a lot of boys that are expecting too much from women in some capacity. They're being coddled a little too much by their mothers, maybe. And there's women that aren't learning like self-respect and how to be treated by a man. I think there's a lot of issues, man. And fundamentally, I don't know if I necessarily agree with the one aspect where he said that there's a lot of young men that identify with what he's saying, or they like things that he's saying. I don't know if they're necessarily positive, all of them, or productive. But yeah.
The fact that people like what I say means that they agree with me deep inside. They may be afraid to say it themselves, but I am seen as a bastion of free speech and a bastion for masculinity as a whole, because a lot of men are largely forgotten about.
Do you think you're a force for good, or are you a force in evolution, where perhaps you've done and said stuff you shouldn't have done, and as you get older, perhaps as you get bigger, more followed around the world, you sense a responsibility perhaps you didn't have early on?
Well, we all evolve. Every human evolves day by day. You wouldn't be human if you didn't evolve on an hour-by-hour basis. But I do not think I'm a force for good. I absolutely not really know I'm a force for good, because I'm a force for truth. And truth is a good thing. Without
this is the problem, is that he's become a martyr because they banned him and shit. It's unfortunate, I'll tell you that much. Because now people perceive him as telling the truth. They're like, well, you wouldn't censor him if he was speaking facts. It's like, oh, well, look what you guys did. You turned him into a fucking martyr.
Up in absolute tyranny and slavery, and we're already on our way there. I feel like we're starting to combat it. My cancellation was the beginning of a change in public consciousness. Elon having Twitter is another beginning of a change in public consciousness. And anybody who stands up and speaks what they truly believe, even if it's something I don't personally agree with, I think that truth is absolutely important. And people's personal truths and people's personal opinions, even on differing sides of the same opinion, should be heard.
I'd really like to see Destiny talk to Andrew Tate, even if, personally, that would be a really interesting engagement, I know that some people might not necessarily, like from the manosphere, like when I think that people who get to know Destiny, the manosphere, seem to like him quite a bit, even if they don't agree with him. But he doesn't come off as like, it's one of those things where, he's and this isn't like an insult. This is just the way that thing, like, just like people look at me and like, oh, he comes off as like this fat fucking racist, conservative, nerd. Is the same way that like people look at Destiny in the sense of like he comes off as like less than a man and like whatever, but he's not. But he has like, he's usually able to do a pretty good job talking to people and getting to the root of it. And one conversation isn't going to be the only thing that you for Destiny. Obviously, you got to get to know somebody. It takes a little bit, but I feel like that would be a really cool, productive conversation. I think that would be great. I would vote for that.
Tell me about your life. You were born to a mixed race couple. Right. Your father was an African American, a chess player, and your mother, she was from this.
What
country.
is this?
Correct.
What the fuck?
Yeah, so my father was black chess player. He was in the Air Force. He met my mother here in England, and then I was raised initially in the United States, and then I moved to Luton, England when I was younger. So I've moved around a lot. I've lived an eclectic life in many different scenarios. We've moved around. I've done a lot of different things, lived a lot of different experiences. And
what nationality are you? I mean, what do you identify as?
I consider myself British now, but I will say that part of me, the patriotic Brit inside of me, is devastated by the state of the UK currently, and I want to make that very clear. The patriotic Brit in me truly loves this country, and seeing what's happening to it, especially to our major cities, is almost heartbreaking to watch in real time.
In what way?
It's falling apart.
I'm not super educated on what's going on over in that fucking shit stain. You know what I'm saying, brother? So I can't really speak too much to it. Okay.
A failed society. By every metric you can possibly measure, it is absolutely and utterly failing. The cost of living crisis, the crime.
I wouldn't say in every metric is failing, but like, yeah, they're having I believe that there's an issue, like an energy crisis issue, and it seems like the top 1% is just kind of like, fucking with people and not paying them because we all have to, we all have to hunker down, but they'll give bailouts to fucking rich companies and banks and shit like that when they do poorly. But when people need a little help, they fuck them in the ass. Not every metric. It's just, there are definitely like pretty big issues, especially when it comes to like representation for the middle class. Yeah, sure.
Rates, everything is falling apart. If you compare it to a country like the United Arab Emirates, you compare it to a city like Dubai, London, which should be the greatest city on earth, is failing in absolutely every metric because our leadership is a joke. If you look at Dubai and the UAE, the leadership there is so flawless, so genuinely genius. They saw ahead and built almost a utopia. And then you look at London, you can't even walk around with a watch on. It's disgusting.
It's very interesting. I was in Qatar for the World Cup. Obviously, a lot of people in England taking a very censorious moral view about the World Cup being in the Middle East at all because of their laws against homosexuality, because of their treatment of migrant workers. I've got to say, not that I don't share the concerns about those things, of course I do, but I found a lot of the virtue signaling, and I think that's what it was in many cases, about the whole region actually quite distasteful. Because when I was in Qatar, I thought the World Cup was fantastically well run, incredibly good experience. But a lot of Qataris were saying to me, there's this weird, quaint feeling back in your country that we all want to aspire to behave like that we all want to live in a country with massive drug problems, with massive knife crime issues, with scenes like the European Championships final where it's complete lawlessness going on, where stuff like the NHS, the system of healthcare, is basically collapsing, where the education system is dropping behind, so on and so on and so on. It's a really interesting perspective. They were like, I know you all think that we want to have your form of democracy and your form of life, but actually we're fine, thanks.
Absolutely, because it's a failed society and it's godless.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty interesting conversation about how, because first of all, the values, Western values, in my opinion, are just the best. I mean, they're the freest values that we have. That being said, when you have like corrupt individuals in the government, taking advantage of the middle class people and fucking people, obviously it doesn't exactly look like the most inspiring way to operate to another country who may not have those Western values. And from my perspective, I think that we should spread those values, but you can't force other countries to adhere to them. So you need to show by example. And when the example you're setting is fuck middle class people, it's not exactly inspiring. It doesn't make people go like, yeah, this is totally fucking based. For sure. I could also understand why people may not want to, have some of this go down in a country that's more regressive when it comes to like homosexuality and stuff. There's two sides to the coin here, but
I think it's disgusting. We leave our old people to rot in old people's homes, and then we sit there and say we don't have enough money for nurses. I understand this nurse strike very well and how frustrating it can be if you walk into a hospital and the nurse is not prepared to work. But the nurses would be prepared to work at the current wage if they believe this country was spending its money prudently. When you see this country spending its money and just absolutely wasting it, pulling out of thin air to fund proxy wars, God knows where, that's nothing to do with them. Of course, as a nurse, you're going to stand up and say, well, can't I get a pension?
If he's referring to the Ukraine, Ukraine, I think we should support Ukraine in their fight against Russia. That's a whole conversation about like how Russia tries to fight wars with like, really us through other countries and how they're trying to land grab and about how like they say we have a claim to this land because there's Russians here in Ukraine, but it's because they genocided Russians out of Ukrainians out of there and then implanted Russians. There's a whole thing. It's just the way that they're dealing with it seems to be not ideal.
Pay rise? This country has failed on every metric. And especially
again, not in every metric. It is definitely not exactly. It could be doing better if there was less greed. That's what I would say.
our major cities. I've just come to London now. I made it very clear to my private jet pilot. I said, fuel the jet and leave it running, because the second I'm finished talking to Piers, I'm leaving this cesspit. It's disgusting. This country, and London as a whole, 10 years ago, was one of the most hospitable cities on earth. Now you cannot walk around safely with a watch on. And you're a full-grown man. You're a full-grown adult. When's the last time there's been a serious problem in your life that you completely ignored and it fixed itself? Never, ever. What are any of our politicians doing to fix any of the problems we're
Well, I saw
genuinely
today
facing?
that Sadiq Khan is planning to run again for the third term of office as mayor. All I can say is everyone I know who's had any experience of crime at any level in London in the last few years has had a bad experience of the way it's been handled. You know, I mean, I can give an example. I can reveal this now. I've talked for 18 months. I got a specific death threat on one of my son's Instagram pages in public, a public comment. And it was very specific about what this person was going to do. Yeah. I couldn't use the police to evade him. We know where you live. We're going to come and kill you. And then a second one threatening my son and his mother, my ex-wife. Christ. I called in the police. I thought, I'm not having them putting death threats on my son's life. Sure. I called the police. Police investigated this. They arrested somebody over a year ago. And then I heard from the police this week that despite 18 months of investigation, of a publicly posted comment on Instagram threatening to kill me on my son's Instagram, that they will not be able to pursue the case. Now,
First of all, that's a horrible story, and that's fucked that happened to Pierce, and that's unacceptable. I don't think that this instance, though, communicates that there's a systemic issue necessarily. This person may have just been very good at engaging in like anonymity online, which is not good. And it was impossible for them to figure who it was necessarily. This doesn't communicate to me like a huge issue. Like, it's a big individual problem, but that doesn't communicate like a systemic issue, which Tate is speaking to. But okay.
Imagine, I'm high profile. This was the front page of the Sun newspaper.
If that same man called a transgender person the wrong pronouns, he would be in trouble.
Right.
So it doesn't.
What? What are you talking about? No, what? Come on. Now you're just acting silly. I understand that things can get a little too woke, especially in online places. I do understand that. But from a police perspective, like, there's no way that they'd be like, yup, this guy's getting the death penalty because they misgendered somebody versus this. They clearly weren't able to catch the correct person. The person might have been using like some kind of like proxy whatever server or IP address. You know, we got all these VPNs or whatever the fuck. And they did it very meticulously. They made a death threat on Piers, probably with like doing it in a way that would make it very difficult or even impossible for them to even find him. To suggest that somehow, if they were trans, that this would have been a big change, like it would have been a better call to action, is just not true. This is just them jerking each other off. But okay.
Doesn't it just show how absolutely asinine and banal our legal system has become? That would never happen in a country like United Arab Emirates, the place I'm now residing in Dubai, where the leadership has common sense. And I'm saying that all the leadership structures, doesn't matter if it's labor or conservative, across all of it in this nation, have
I don't know if they would necessarily have this. I don't know if they'd have better infrastructure to figure out this person, but okay.
Utterly failed. Sadiq Khan is a loser, because when you have a city which is losing, which London is losing in all metrics across its competitive cities around the world, and you're in charge of it, by extension, you're a loser. I will tell you right now, instead of virtue signaling and giving Qatar a hard time over their religious beliefs, what we should be doing is a treaty with Qatar to build a prison deep in the desert. Make me mayor of London. We'll make a prison deep in the desert, and if you're caught with a knife or robbing someone, you can go do 25 years with one meal a day in the scorching sun. And then what we'll do is we'll put cameras there, and we'll interview you once a week and broadcast that out to the nation and see if you change your mind and make people understand that this is a country that should be respected and our laws should be respected. Instead, what happens? What has Sadiq or any of the people in charge of this country actually done to fix any of our issues besides sit around and talk? Nothing. None of them have done anything, but they seem ultra concerned with finding money for proxy wars, ultra concerned with rainbow flags. Years. Make me mayor of London. We'll make a prison deep in the desert, and if you're caught with a knife or robbing someone, you can go do 25 years with one meal a day in the scorching sun. And then
maybe I mean, it's possible that that could help being more aggressive for crime. Okay.
Well, understand that this is a country that should be respected and our laws should be respected. Instead, what happens? What has Sadiq or any of the people in charge of this country actually done to fix any of our issues besides?
I think the reason that we wouldn't, first of all, it could work. I don't know. I haven't exactly explored it. Maybe it'll work. I don't know. But I think the reason why they wouldn't do that is because it's considered a human rights violation. And that's like the concept of just because you're arrested doesn't mean that you lose your human rights. Okay. Okay.
Around and talk. Nothing. None of them have done anything, but they seem ultra concerned with finding money for proxy wars, ultra concerned with rainbow flags in another country that is uninterested in them, and their priorities are completely messed up. Of course the ambulance people are. Of course the ambulance drivers are striking. Of course the nurses are striking. Nobody cares about the most important things in this nation. It's a failing country in real time, and that's why I've left.
What about the specific allegation? By the way, I don't disagree with a lot of that, because I do think this country is in big trouble. And I do think that one of the problems is people think if they do have a crime against them, nobody cares anymore.
I know nobody cares. I have specific examples and people who I know personally. Absolutely and utterly nobody cares. I was in Harrods yesterday and someone tried to rob someone's watch in the middle of the store. I walk around with I have a security team of 6 full-grown men, plus me and my brother, 8 military-age males, all over 110 kilos, big men, just so I can walk around this city. It's absolutely unacceptable.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
What about the issue of race? And I mentioned that in the context of the Harry and Meghan ongoing debate, their war with the royal family, war against the monarchy, their specific constant referencing to the fact that they believe they were driven out of here because of racism in Britain. What do you make of that debate?
That's absolute fallacy.
And you're from a mixed race background yourself.
Correct. I'm from a mixed race background myself. And while we're discussing the leaders of...
So I'm not entirely sure what...
Their specific Harry and Meghan ongoing debate, their war with the royal family.
Big men, just so I can...
Context of the Harry and Meghan ongoing debate, their war with the royal family, war against the monarchy, their specific constant referencing to the fact...
I mean, there's some issues I just can't really speak on because I don't really know the specifics. Oh, I forgot someone who sent me
Joel's Journey
Sorry,
super
brother.
chatted $2. Hey,
Look.
Papa, instead of Warcraft, I'm doing RuneScape.
Very base, brother. Okay.
That they believe they were driven out of here because of racism in Britain. What do you make of that debate?
I have no idea. I don't know what they're referring to. Maybe it's possible. I don't know.
That's absolute fallacy.
And you're from a mixed race background yourself.
Correct. I'm from a mixed race background myself. And while we're discussing the leaders of the UK, although I do think they're doing a terrible job, it's kind of hard for Meghan to say that the UK is a racist country when the leader of the UK is darker skinned than her and the mayor of London is darker skinned than her. And I am a person who's probably darker skinned than her. And I've never experienced any kind of bigotry against myself, besides the fact I'm a straight male. I'll get bigotry for that before I'll get bigotry for my skin color.
Well, I don't know if... Listen, I don't know if he's ever faced bigotry for being a straight male, to be honest with you. He's a very abrasive person. And historically, when he's on Big Brother, he was intentionally trying to be a very abrasive person. Okay, but sure.
I think it's just a cop-out and her not wanting to be perspicacious and self-reflective enough to understand that she has attacked an age-old institution, and there are people who are very patriotic about that institution.
What the fuck
and by
is
attacking
this?
it and bringing a degree of distaste to it, there's going to be people who don't like her. And if you're a dislikable person, you can't just instantly stand up and say it's because of my skin color. It might be because of your actions and some of the things you've said.
I mean, I think there's probably no doubt she's had racism on social media because it's...
Who hasn't, Piers?
It's assessed.
You probably have.
Well, as I said just now, I've had death threats on social media and no one seemed to care very much.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably inarguable. My issue with what they've both been doing is if you're going to make allegations against an institution like the royal family and the monarchy, you've got to actually provide some evidence. You can't just spray gun this thing out there and say, well, somebody was racist.
Yeah, and airing dirty laundry is never going to be respected by the populace, and being a tattletale is never going to be respected by the populace. And I think the problem with the modern world we're living in is a lot of age-old traditions are being destroyed in real time. It doesn't matter what the tradition is; most of them are being eroded. And something like the British royal family, which has been around for a very long time, is an age-old tradition. One of the things holding the UK together, one of the last things we have, to sit and detriment it and to sit and insult it and to give away secrets from inside of it and try and paint a negative image of it is going to upset a lot of people. And you have to be prepared for that backlash. You can't say I've done things that upset people, but it's nothing to do with what I've done. It's purely because of my skin color. Also, it's kind of ironic that she's doing that because she's not particularly dark skinned. It's kind of funny to watch her sit and say,
I think the truth is, I don't know what, look, you can say that, I can't. The reality of it is, I just don't know what the specifics of the racism she says she's had because we've not seen any evidence.
The universe is a funny place, Piers. If you're looking for something, you're going to find it, right? When I got canceled, when they attacked me unfairly, lied about...
What is the point of this conversation? Because so far it kind of just sounds like Piers brought him on so that he could speak on a topic of race without being racist because he's black. It almost seems like Piers is just almost like basically using Andrew Tate's being black to speak against like a topic. It just, I'm not saying that makes Andrew Tate's perspective invalid. What I'm saying is it just doesn't seem like, it seems like he's literally here just for Piers to be able to see, like, yeah, see, that's what I was saying, but I feel like I can't say because I'm white or something. It's bizarre. Does Piers actually give a fuck about Andrew Tate, or is he just using him? It's weird.
About me across the entire mainstream media, deleted me from social media so I couldn't defend myself, and lied about me repeatedly. I could have stood up and said, it's because I'm brown. I didn't do that. I sat and said, okay, there's people who misunderstand my message. My message is a positive one. People misunderstand me.
Well, I don't think it's a misunderstanding. Again, like you were the one putting out those just out of context clips that, or it was your audience that thought it was super duper based. Okay, sure, whatever.
Let me self-reflect and understand that, yes, perhaps this said a long time ago was said in the wrong way. Perhaps this was misunderstood.
Okay,
perhaps
fair.
people don't understand this. I could have just copped out and could have just been refusing to self-reflect on any level and said, it's because I'm brown, that's why they did it. But that's not the immature way to be as an adult.
What did you think of the Jeremy Clarkson furore, where he wrote what I think most people, but including him belatedly after he'd published it and written the column, he did make an analogy from a Game of Thrones scene, which most people, I think, did find crossed a line and was deeply offensive. I think it crossed a line. What do you think?
Yeah, I understand.
Well, what did he say? What I feel okay.
And why people feel that.
It was deeply offensive from a Game of Thrones
Jorge
scene.
Paramo super chatted $2 for being top G. Become top pappy gut.
Top gut, baby. The real top G. Top blood pressure.
Published it and furore, where he...
They did it. But that's not the immature way to be as an adult.
What did you think of the Jeremy Clarkson furore, where he wrote what I think most people, but including him belatedly after he'd published it and written the column, he did make an analogy from a Game of Thrones scene, which most people, I think, did find crossed a line and was deeply offensive. I think it...
Okay, I have to see what we're talking about. Okay, it would have been nice if Piers explained this. Jeremy Clark... This is so annoying, dude. There's just so many fucking ads and shit. Okay. Jeremy Clarkson apologizes for saying Meghan Markle deserved Cersei's shame scene from Game of Thrones. The British tabloid The Sun is notorious Republican, blah, 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 blah. He explicitly writes that he wishes the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, to have a fate like Cersei's of scene. Why? Meghan, though, is a different story. I hate her. Not like I hate Nicole, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I hate her on a cellular level. At night, I'm unable to sleep as I lie there, grinding my teeth and dreaming of the day where she's made to parade naked through the streets in every town in Britain whilst the crowd chants shame and throw lumps of excrement at her. Why did they censor the whatever? Clarkson writes in The Sun. Okay, yeah, seems insensitive. Okay.
Get across the line. What do you think?
Yeah, I understand why people feel that. But when you attack an institution as old as the British royal family, you're attacking patriotism in and of itself for one of the...
Frankly, respectively, fuck the British royal family. It literally provides nothing of actual value, so... Okay, I mean, our country has problems, but they don't do anything productive. It's a status symbol. It's literally a waste of money. You want to talk about money wasting? Let's talk about that. That's a waste of money. Fuck, like there's no reason for the royal family to exist. It doesn't do anything productive for anybody. It's a waste. That's like don't we all know this? It's a joke. It's ridiculous. So who cares? I don't give a fuck. Like whatever.
Most respected countries or previously most respected countries on earth, and you're going to have some visceral reactions. Perhaps Jeremy Clarkson is too famous and too well-renowned to say those kind of things, but there's a lot of people who genuinely feel that way, and that's why he said it. And this is what happens when you attack age-old institutions in any country.
Should he ever apologize?
That's a good question. It looks like he did. Personally, I think as a man, you should stand up, say what you mean what you say. I don't think you should ever apologize for anything you've ever said. Even me.
Well, I think that's a little silly. There's times where you get things wrong and you should apologize. I will say that there is a way to apologize. I don't think that unless you do something deeply terrible, I don't think that you need to like get on your fucking hands and knees and grovel in your apology like a fucking loser. But I think that you can apologize and take accountability for something without going over the line and being like fucking crazy or engaging in like a YouTube apology where like you just go way too deep into the apology of like, oh, I'm so sorry, and you start like fucking crying and shitting and coming, you know.
What if you say something truly very offensive and you actually do regret it?
If you truly regret it, then yeah, okay, you can apologize. But if at the time you meant it, then the best thing you can do is say, look, I have just changed my mind. I no longer feel that way, but at the time that's how I felt, and I'm the person who says what he feels, and that's what I felt at the time, and I apologize I offended you.
Andrew Tate, we'll be back with you after the break. We'll talk to you about Twitter again. Elon Musk restoring his platform. Has it calmed you down? Are you as controversial on there? Are you mindful that you're only one false move, like Kanye West, for example, away from being removed again? Well, Elon Musk has restored a throng of banned accounts.
I guess this is like an edited thing of it, but okay, whatever.
Over Twitter with a sworn commitment to free speech. It's also shown he has a line of his own, though. Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones remains banned. Kanye West was reinstated, then banned again for posting a swastika inside a Star of David. Andrew Tate is back too, for now. Anyway, he was first removed in 2017 for saying women should bear some responsibility as victims of rape, and he hasn't exactly been shy since his reprieve.
That was a hell of a story, Tate.
Let's take a look. Genghis Khan had endless women and 200 children as a reward for conquest. He tweeted, I'm the most searched man on the planet. I've conquered Earth. I'm the highest status male on the planet. Females do not expect loyalty from me. They only expect that of lesser men. Okay. Then there was this. Imagine having less than 10 children because you're a...
Well, that doesn't really matter too much to me. I mean, that's just him saying I have a lot of money, right? The Genghis Khan part, well, the Genghis Khan part's very ignorant because Genghis Khan was, I believe, a rapist. And that's why he had so many children. So this does glorify rape culture, like active, like literal glorification of actual rape. Let's not even say rape culture, because it's this. That's something else. So I could see the problematic aspect there. That just comes from ignorance. I think maybe he's just a dumb fuck. I don't really know. I mean, that does. If he does understand this, that does speak to him being very ignorant. I mean, he's literally a reward for conquest. I mean, that's like, oh, we took over territory. Now we can rape women. That's not good. That's really bad. Oh, Jesus Christ. What a fucking... Okay, that's very problematic. All right. Jesus Christ, dude. What the fuck? Okay. The loyalty part I don't care about. They don't expect loyalty from me. That's fine. Maybe he doesn't realize that Genghis Khan, like... I don't think he understands... Does he not understand what he's saying?
From me. You don't expect that of lesser men. Then there was...
Yeah, I mean, he raped a lot of women. But, okay.
this. Imagine having less than 10 children because you're a
pussy boy who doesn't have 4 wives. Okay.
who doesn't have 4 wives, genetic failures.
I guess he's just trying to say like really dumb based things. Obviously, not everybody can have like a bunch of wives, and frankly, to raise your children happy and healthy, I think you need to be in a 2-parent household. So.
Finally, if a girl follows me and she's hot and I see a single picture of her in a private jet, it's block. Women can't afford jets when they're all brokies. Why are you flying around on some man's jet? You should have been a virgin when I met you. Haram. All right, Andrew Tate.
Obviously, I think that one is obviously like a little bit of a joke, but I think at the core, what he's trying to say is he probably does think that a lot of the women that he would probably associate with, which tend to be women that are more, traditionally attractive and probably work less, younger, traditionally attractive, don't really work for anything. Obviously wouldn't be able to afford a jet. So if he sees them, he's going to pass on them because he thinks that they're hoeing around. So I believe that's the interpretation of that one. So very base stage. Obviously saying it to get a rise out of people, which is a little, I think that there's something to be said. If you intentionally say things just to get a rise out of people, then maybe, I don't know. I mean, I get like from a comedic perspective, but maybe like it's a little weird, but okay, whatever.
You're getting very near the knuckle with some of those tweets.
Am I?
You tell me.
Knuckle.
I don't think so. I think people can understand they're semi-satirical. I think people can understand.
Do you mean them as jokes or do you mean them?
No, I don't mean them as jokes. I mean, they're a overall public commentary and observation. I do mean what I say. If I were to see a girl on a private plane on Instagram, for example, I would assume that a man put her on that private plane. I would not assume she bought it herself.
What if it was...
Perhaps that makes me misogynistic.
What if it was Ariana Grande or Beyonce?
Well, that's slightly different, isn't it?
Why?
Because they're famous and very
They're
rich.
women?
Yeah, of course, and they're famous and very rich. But
so lots of women, you wouldn't think that if you actually saw them on a private plane.
If I saw a 19-year-old girl from Moldova where the average wage is $200 a month and she was on a private jet, I would assume that with the balance of probabilities, considering I'm an adult, it's very likely because of her beauty, a man has put her on that private plane. Yes. Sure. If that makes me misogynistic instead of just perspicacious enough to understand how the world works, so be it. I'm a realist.
Well, no, he's right about that. That's the thing, though, is like he wanted that to be taken out of context. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm going to say some raunchy ass shit, and then people are going to take him out of context, and they're going to give me attention, and he's basically hate farming. It's like, you know what you're saying, bro. Come on. You know what I mean? Like, come on. You're being a little suspicious there with that one, but okay. But he's right.
Should you be such a generalist about these things?
Well, you have to be a generalist when you're looking for in the balance of probabilities and trying to find balance in the world.
That's not what he's doing, though. He's just trying to make some fucking base, like whatever. You know what I mean? At least I'll be like, I'm just too fucking based, baby. You know what I mean?
To be a generalist. In general, if I stroke a lion, it's going to bite my hand. In general, there might be a nice one, but I don't want to find out. So that's how the world works.
Sure.
You praised the Taliban in the past. Would you do so again tonight?
The world is not black and white. The world is gray. It's very difficult to sit and make black and white assumptions about anything. To sit and say that the Taliban are completely and utterly evil and we're completely and utterly good, as you just discussed with the moral high ground.
Okay.
I believe that the Taliban bring law and order. It may not be the law and order we like, but it's a form of law and order. And
very regressive law and order and very abusive, but okay. All right.
Humans usually gravitate
What about
towards...
their treatment of women? I mean, only tonight they have banned any women from going to university.
Fantastic. Let's get the feminists to go and teach them a lesson. The feminists are so tough, and they stand up and say they can do anything a man can do. Let's arm them up and send them to Afghanistan. I'm sure they'll fix it.
Yeah, but it's...
Oh, damn. Andrew Tate's basically... There's no defense of that point. What Bro, you can't even like rationalize. This is not a good interview for Andrew Tate. You can't rationalize that. Like they're trying to make it so women can't go to school. He's like, yeah, good. Let the feminists fight them. Well, why do they need to fight? Why shouldn't women have access to school? Now, if we're having a nuanced conversation about like women in the military and combat roles, and you're sitting here and you're like, Papa God, I don't know how I feel about women being in combat roles because physically speaking, Women aren't able to do what men can do. And in a combat scenario, I'm apprehensive. And I say, I understand where you're coming from because you're not being sexist. You're acknowledging a difference. I respect that. But when you're like, yeah, women shouldn't go to school. Why? Women do very well in school. They have very high outcomes. In some cases, better than men. They're good at different things. We need women in school so they can be nurses and shit, right? And Tate's like, yeah, let them physically fight them. But that's not, school isn't like a public physical arena. It's school. Like, you would intellectually engage. This is not very good.
Law and order, and humans usually gravitate
What about their
towards...
treatment of women? I mean, only tonight they have banned any women from going to university.
Fantastic. Let's get the feminists to go and teach them a lesson. The feminists are so tough, and they stand up and say they can do anything a man can do. Let's arm them up and send them to Afghanistan. I'm sure they'll fix it.
Yeah, but it's
What does that have to do with going to fucking school? Well, I don't understand. What are you talking about?
it's not. It's a serious matter, isn't it? That women don't get the education they deserve.
And that's a very serious answer. If women are just as capable as men in terms of combat, like feminists pretend they are, they can go over there and they can deal with it.
A lot of women do.
Well, this has nothing to do with combat. This has nothing to do with combat, though, right? We're aware of this, right, Tate? You're aware that this isn't a combat. This is university. This is just impressively unintelligent from Andrew Tate, and there's literally no rationale here that you could be like, see, he's not right. He's being sexist here. I mean, there's no other explanation. Like, why not have women in university? Okay.
You can go to combat.
Exactly. So they can go deal with the Taliban. It's nothing to do with me. They can stand up and fight for their own rights.
Surely you wouldn't defend the Taliban banning women from university.
It's saying it's nothing to do with me, Piers. It's absolutely nothing to do with me.
What about the Afghan women?
It's nothing to do with me on any level.
You don't have a view?
I have a view. My view is that people naturally gravitate towards law and order, and if you didn't have the Taliban, you'd have different warlords operating in lawlessness, and there would be no way to prevent your store or your market stall getting completely robbed by someone with an AK-47, and people are going to gravitate towards a form of law and order. America...
So, like, what's stopping us from just saying that, like, everything that all the problems that he has in England, despite that existence, there's law and order there, and so who cares? Because there's still violence over there, right? Bro, it's so dumb. To be honest with you, I think that Andrew Tate's being a coward and he won't stand up and just say his perspective. I don't know. Maybe he's just sexist, or maybe he's just pandering to fucking the Taliban. I don't know fucking idea what's going on here. Okay. Incredible stuff.
Left. They left a power vacuum, and the power vacuum is now full.
Well, I don't disagree with that.
Okay. Well,
but I do think the banning of women from university in Afghanistan is utterly horrific.
And I think feminists are going to arm themselves. They're going to show us that they can do anything a man can do. They're going to go over there to combat and teach Taliban lessons.
Why can't you just say on that, you know what, it's completely...
I don't like the fundamental aspect because what Tate is advocating for here is a problem I have, and it's a problem of not being a man. I'm going to explain to you why. Weak people that aren't real men will bully people they perceive as weaker than them, right? So they'll bully women. Like, because we feel like we can, we're going to. And women are physically generally weaker than men, right? It's outliers, of course, but the strongest man will obviously beat the strongest woman. And so he's saying, like, yeah, the Taliban, whatever, who cares? Let women go fight their own battles. If they can fight them, then they can win. And that's it. That's this whole metric is if they're good enough, they can go fight the battle themselves. Well, I mean, all we're doing is we're advocating for the, like, just effectively saying, because I'm stronger means I can do whatever I want over you. I could take from you because I'm stronger. That's pathetic and childish, no? Like,
you're wrong.
Because it's not my point.
That's weak. I mean, if a man is supposed to stand up for people who are weaker than him, right? How does this, or they perceive as weaker in at least some capacity? Maybe it's physically. Okay.
I don't understand.
But it makes me think. It'll make your critics think that you don't think it's wrong.
They could ban all men. They could ban all short people.
But they're not. They're only banning women.
Correct. They could ban all short people. They could ban all people with long hair. And none of it's anything to do with me. So,
but those things would all be bad, right? Like, why not just be like, yeah, this is bad. Here's what you could say: hey, I think that these things are bad and wrong, but personally, it's not my country, and I don't want to get involved. Okay, I can understand that take. But it just feels very weak to not give a perspective out of whatever fear it is, whether it's you're sexist and you don't give a shit about women, or if you're just afraid of the Taliban or something. I don't really get it. It's just fucking pathetic.
So they can do whatever they want. I'm not going to go to war with the Taliban.
But you've just literally spent an impassioned first segment comparing the way, for example, Dubai handles law and order.
Correct.
Let me explain something to you. Let me tell you something. I remember watching the conversation with Lex Friedman and Ben Shapiro. And it actually made me, despite the fact that I disagree with Ben a lot, it made me respect Ben as a man. You know, he's obviously very family oriented. He's a very excellent father, from what it seems. A good husband, excellent husband. Let's say he's a good father and he's a good husband. And I say good for a particular reason, because they got to a point where they talked about goodness in the world versus greatness in the world. And he talked about how, and Ben made this take, and it really resonated with me, and I really respect it. And he talked about how it's easy to be great, it's not easy to be good, and the world is driven by good people. Andrew Tate is a great man, but he's not a good man. He's a man that is very notorious. He has a lot of clout. He has a lot of attention on him. He has a very strong message that people may resonate with, but it's not a good message. He's not a good man, and his values don't lead to mutual respect of women and family. And not to be rude, but that's why he's 30-something, and he hasn't able to settle down with the woman and create a positive, strong family. I don't think that's really what it boils down to. He's got a lot of money. He's very accomplished. Good for him. He's a very great man. But where's the goodness? Where's the passing of a positive value of other to your children, to your son, your daughter, of being a strong person that sticks up for people? You know, it just doesn't exist. You know, if we had more Andrew Tates in the world, we would have a failing world. You know, the problem is that I think that for a lot of people, they're perceiving a lot of Western men as weak. And so they see strength in Andrew Tate and go, see, he's strong. I like him. And maybe there's the truth to that. Maybe we do have weak Western men. To be honest with you, again, I think it has to do with fucking fatherless children. We don't have enough fucking strong fathers in their household. You know? And like gay people are an outlier, you know, whatever. I'm not criticizing gay relationships. I'm just talking about your traditional general relationship. You know, where are the dads at? You know? It's a lot more men that don't want to be in their child's lives than women. It's just the reality. And I think it comes from the fact that when a woman's carrying a baby, it's more of a person to them because they're carrying it in their body. And when they release it, they know they release all their hormones and pheromones and blah, blah, blah. For men, that bonding time happens afterwards. And if you've already left that woman because you didn't want to have that kid, whether you pay child support or not, doesn't mean that you're there instilling a value. I guarantee you that someone that grows up with less money but two good parents in the household will perform better than somebody who grows up with a lot of money with no dad or no mom. You know, they're not going to be morally good people that can contribute to the world or go through a hardship. There are people who can only exist when they have money. You know what I mean? So.
To this country.
Correct.
So you do express views about different laws.
Absolutely. Both places.
So when I put to you a law that basically bans women from being educated, it's not. Why is it a problem for you to say, you know what, it's wrong?
They're both places I've resided in. Dubai and London, so I have personal experience. I can give my personal opinion, but like I said, it has absolutely nothing to do with me with what the Taliban decide to do inside of Afghanistan. And if they decide that's the most prudent way to run their society, then we have two choices. We can either go over there and start another war that we shouldn't be involved in and waste a bunch of life, or we can sit and say, it's up to them, they should govern themselves, they're people, we're no better.
Or we could say like, hey, I don't think that it's worth getting involved in a war over there, but I think that it's wrong and I'm going to advocate against it socially. Like, what's wrong with that take? I don't understand.
Them, and they've decided to live their lives a particular way, and that's how they're going to live it. Like I said, if feminists are very upset and they're very disgusted by the fact that in Afghanistan, women cannot go to school, I've been told repeatedly by feminists that they're just as capable as men in all realms, and I expect them to arm themselves and fly over to Afghanistan and fix it.
Like a lot of
most, there's obviously like people that are obnoxious when it comes to feminism, and they think that men and women are exactly equal. It's not about being exactly equal. You know, that's the bad parts of it. Those are the losers on TikTok that have bled into society because they're getting older. Realistically speaking, it's just about providing an equal opportunity to people, whether they're men or women. Right. Now, it's devolved in some capacity. I think any social movement devolves, whether it's advocacy for women, you know, the BLM, advocacy for men. Andrew Tate's a very clear example of how it's gone too far. Clearly, there are men who are frustrated, and we haven't listened to them, and now the advocacy has gone to this fucking insane degree. It's about like equality of opportunity. Hey, here's a job. Can you do it? Yep. You got the job. Are you qualified? Yep. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. There's going to be jobs where men or women aren't as qualified. Women are probably better for caretaking roles than men. Men are better in combat roles than women. It's not about, oh, well, then have the women fight. Why? Why should we have to do that? Why? Why does it have to be that fucking crazy, man?
women have done in combat.
Good. Congratulations. Go fight. Well, this is the thing that's very interesting, because when you talk about ideas, it's not even just about Afghanistan and feminism. You talk about ideas, they must all be defended at some point. There has to come down to violence. The world is backed by violence. Nobody wants to talk about this. It doesn't matter what it is. If you have a disagreement between two parties, eventually, if the disagreement continues, it ends up in violence. Feminism is defended by men. Men stand up and defend feminism, not feminists themselves, because they're incapable of violence. And we're in a situation now where you're saying that we should send men to go and fight for feminism. Why?
Yeah, why not?
It's not a man's problem.
No, I think, I'm saying
feminists believe.
I think men can be feminists too, because if feminism believes in.
Well, I've said it like a bunch of times. Like if some man identifies as a feminist, that's a red flag for me. But a man can still be an advocate for equality, especially of opportunity. So
equality for women,
It's
I'll
not about
sign up to
equality.
it. I don't agree with radical feminists who hate men. Right? To me, the radical anything to me is a bad thing.
sure.
Yeah, and I think
agree
most
with that.
feminism in the West currently is radical.
Well, some of it is.
I don't think most of it is. I think that generally speaking, we've pretty much come to terms where like everybody is like legally equal. It's a social conversation about some different like interpretations. I think that the existence of Andrew Tate and what he's saying now is proof that feminism is still necessary in some capacity. Obviously because of like the insane regressive idea he has about feminism and how to me he's just advocating for weakness in society. Yeah.
No question.
Absolutely, but this is my point. My point is that what the Taliban are going to do.
What if it was like what if you had a single mother? You know what I mean? And like now she's she can't go to university. Think about that. A big reason why like women should have the equality of opportunity is because like there's unideal scenarios, and forcing women to be tied to a man for any level of success in their life is ridiculous. And I'd say the opposite is also ridiculous as well. We should never live in a society that forces a man to be held by women in order for them to be successful, right? In any like active way. I do think men and women together create more success. I think a good woman brings out a man, and a good woman brings out the best in a man, and a good man brings out the best in a woman. But nothing should be forced. Women should be able to make their own money if they're capable of doing a particular job. I've had women bosses before that are perfectly capable. There's different leadership styles that come with being a man versus being a woman. There's some women who overcompensate because they don't want to be perceived as bitchy. And then there are men who are too weak and they get rolled over. And then there are people who are just good. I've had good male bosses, good female bosses, good bad male and female bosses, right? Women tend to be a little more empathetic, but which I appreciate in my female bosses a lot, which is something that I like. It's very nice. But then with some of the male bosses, sometimes they're a little harder and they don't put up with any shit, and sometimes the outcomes are better. It's just different. There's just different leadership styles, and they work very well together. You know what I mean? It's just fucking crazy. Yeah, man. I don't know. Not really speaking facts.
Whatever the Taliban decide to do. If I'm going to fly over to another country, I will respect their laws and customs. It's not my job to come along and tell other people how to live. I don't believe I have a moral high ground in that degree. And if people are genuinely
So then why are you trying to tell people in the Western world how to live if you live in another country now? That just seems kind of weird. I don't know. Okay.
upset and disgusted by it, the bottom line in most disagreements on the earth is violence. People who feel like they should go and fix it, then fix it with violence, then it can be the feminists who feel so outraged by it. But it's funny, they don't comment on these subjects, feminists. They seem to instead attack the Western male for some reason.
You've deleted a video in which you praised ISIS. Why?
I don't know which video you're talking about in particular. It might have been a video from a long time ago. But in general, I understand that, like I said, the world is not black and white. The world is gray areas. And Western imperialism as a whole has been causing more problems than it's ever fixed. And it's disgusting. And
Maybe. That's not a conversation I think I'm, or Tate, I don't think either of us are necessarily equipped to have. But there's definitely criticism of Western imperialism, 100% for sure. It depends on why you have a problem with it. It definitely leads to financial oppression in these other countries and a lack of ability for them to have money in general, which is always a bad thing. At the same time, there's the spreading of Western values, which I think are better, but it kind of actually doesn't really help spread those Western values. It just steals resources from other countries in a lot of cases to be able to strengthen their own country. So yeah, I think it's overall bad. Well, there's definitely a conversation there that I would not be equipped to have, like in a total sense. Because then some people would argue that there's a spreading of resources back and forth, and I guess not colonization necessarily, and like better trading. This is a whole fucking conversation. This is probably above me, so okay.
I don't know the exact video you're referencing, but
I guess I would generally agree. Sure.
Dog destroys a Western imperialist. I have a degree of, I wouldn't say satisfaction, but
Satisfaction?
No, but there's certainly a degree of
the way ISIS
I don't know the particular.
conducted themselves.
I don't know about the particular video we're talking
Well,
about.
ISIS were one of the most deadly terror groups in the world.
Absolutely.
They committed a series of appalling atrocities, killing innocent people left, right, and
Completely,
centre.
yeah.
How could you possibly have satisfaction?
Well, if it's the video I'm recollecting, if it's the video we're talking about, it's about the fact that I believe ISIS was funded by the West and created by the West in the first place. And it wasn't a degree of satisfaction like I'm happy ISIS exists. It was a commentary on the world.
Well, here's what you said. ISIS are the real Muslims because ISIS do exactly what the book says. Kill everyone who's not a Muslim and chop people's heads off and set them on fire and be raging lunatics. But all the other Muslims go, they're not real Muslims because I read the book and ignore those parts. Well, then you're not an effing Muslim because you're ignoring the effing book.
That's an interesting point you've just raised because I am now Islamic. And it's funny because I used to be an atheist. And when you're an atheist, you believe that religion causes more problems than it fixes. And then you come to a realization and you start to learn the truth of yourself and the truth of God. And you realize that religion is actually the cure for most of the problems in the world. And godlessness is the problem in the world.
So this is I tend to disagree. The reality is that religious extremism religion can be like really good. It can be such a powerful force for a lot of people. It can be a really positive moral center to try to keep, especially families together. I think family is very important. I think staying together and raising kids is very important. I think that's a huge problem that we're having. A strong family unit can overcome anything. So I absolutely agree with that. However, there's also a lot that can be abused from like religious texts. There's a lot of sexism, homophobia that can be abused. The dynamic can absolutely contribute to a man having too much power in a relationship and causing women to be put in an abusive scenario, right? That's where it gets bad. When it comes to other countries, there's deep amount of just sexism, especially in like non-first world countries that tend to be like Muslim. And it's not inherent. I think that regardless of what religious teaching you're saying, the overall practice is the same, and they can, if interpreted that way, teach sexism and homophobia, justify those. A lot of them even justify slavery in different aspects. I don't know if I'd say religion causes more problems. I think religion can be a really good contributor to an already strong moral society. So if you have a really good moral society that like values differences in opinion, differences in people, and respects people for their existence, regardless of whether they're gay, straight, man, woman, whatever, then religion can be like a good additive. But I think that religion can cause a significant amount of harm. There's a lot of wars that have been started because of religion. I'm not saying we should get rid of religion. I'm just saying I don't think that's necessarily accurate. You know? I think that religion is just another form of, it can be very much just another form of tribalism that encourages people to hate each other for no fucking reason other than like, this is our tribe. I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm just saying that there's some negatives there, but there's positives to take from religion as well, you know? And it doesn't seem like he takes the correct positives though. The positives from religion is like settling down, building a family, you know, protecting your wife and your kids, you know, but building community, you know, the strong community. These are some things that religion teaches people. If you get those values out of it, doesn't seem like he adheres to any of those values. It seems like he just adheres to the values that women should be subservient to men in some capacity, because like literally just went on a whole rampage and a whole rant about how like, he doesn't care that the Taliban are taking away the ability for women to go to school because women should just go fight it for themselves. That's not really building a strong community. So I don't think he was ever like really. I don't think that he's really religious now. I think that he is a bad religious person that just weaponizes religion to justify his sexist opinions, and he makes for people who are religious look bad.
So that is something I will apologize for, admit I was wrong about, because I was atheistic, and now as a Muslim, I understand that's absolutely not the case. If that's a particular video you're talking about, then there's...
Well, that's really interesting. So you regret saying that?
Yeah, because you learn and you grow and you evolve, as I said. At the time, I believed it because I didn't believe in God at the time. It was a very long time ago. It's actually kind of a testament to you, Piers. You managed to find the oldest possible videos of me that have ever existed. But at the time, I was atheistic.
Well, no, I was curious because you have recently converted to Islam.
Correct.
So these questions, I think, are pertinent to your conversion.
Absolutely.
As to what you actually believe as a practicing Muslim.
Yeah, I believe that Islam is beautiful. I believe it's the last true religion on earth. It's certainly the last respected religion on earth. And I felt differently inside since I've converted. And I think it has the solutions to a lot of the problems we're facing in the world today. That particular video was once again satirical. A lot of people watching this would not have seen it. They would not have seen the joke element of it. It's fine. But
it's not funny, though, is it?
Well, you know, it's like most of the time, as we discussed in our first interview with me, things are taken out of context, short form, et cetera, et cetera. But all in all, you could say the same things about Christians.
I don't think that things are really taken out of context, man. I think that like that's the context that is intended. I understand that he might joke around, but again, it's his own people who put his things out of context. And it's hard to say that it's out of context when that's the people that you want to gravitate towards you. Like, people aren't taking them out of context. It's like other people, your fans, are putting it out there because that's the message they're getting out of what you're saying. It's a little bit of a victim complex to just constantly say everything's out of context. I mean, how like things can be out of context, but like at what point do you take accountability for what you said, you know?
If you were to read the Old Testament and say, stick to the Old Testament, you'd kill anyone who works on a Sunday. So it's not applicable to...
You wouldn't countenance violence.
Say again?
You don't countenance violence.
I absolutely do not countenance violence. When I was talking about violence being the bottom line decider between disagreeing points of view, it's not I'm calling for violence. I'm just making a commentary on how the world genuinely functions.
But when you use a word like satisfaction, you understand that people will watch that and think, how can you possibly find any form of terrorism satisfying?
I don't find any form of terrorism satisfying. I don't find Western terrorism satisfying either. I don't think it's satisfying that we managed to find $500,000 per bomb to drop on some farmer who makes $4 a day under the name of freedom. And, and we can't seem to pay our nurses enough to do their jobs. I don't find any kind of terrorism.
That's fair.
It's actually very interesting you talk about the word terrorism. Terrorist and freedom fighter, good guy and bad guy, all of this is subjective. There are people who believe that the West are the biggest terrorists on the earth. There are people who believe that America causes more wars than anyone else, and they've killed more people than anyone else. And there's people who believe the absolute opposite. So once again, it depends who you're talking to. It's a subjective conversation. There's no black and white in the world. There's areas of gray, and that's how it is. So I thought you were talking about another video where I was saying that ISIS is standing up and fighting for what they believe in. I'm not saying what they believe in is right, but that's what they were fighting for at the time. And it was a completely different video than the one you were actually referencing.
But you would condemn them now?
I don't condemn anybody doing anything bad to anybody. I'm not a person out here with a criminal record. I don't hurt anyone. I just spent my first segment on this show talking about how I believe in law and order and how important that is. I think people can operate inside of their lives safely and walk around, man, woman, child can walk around in safety in any city they live in. How that law and order is constructed is not my jurisdiction. I'm not in charge of the law and order of Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, any of them. It's nothing to do with me.
I want to talk to you after the break about masculinity. Why is it that so many young men gravitate to you? What is your view of what it takes to be a man? Welcome back to this special edition of Piers Morgan Uncensored with Andrew Tate, one-on-one. So Ash Sarkar, who's a lively contributor to this programme, has tweeted, Andrew Tate, who you're interviewing about free speech, thinks women are a man's property. We shouldn't be allowed to drive. Boasts about only dating teenagers to imprint on them. Misogynists are disgusting whether they're in Afghanistan or a swanky London studio.
There's a point there, man. Listen, I understand that, like, a lot of men... Listen, okay. Obviously, I understand why a lot of men find younger girls attractive. Now, personally, it gets a little weird, even if they're legal, when you're 30-something years old dating 18-year-olds. The biggest thing that I find weird more than anything else is the maturity level of that person versus you. It's, to me, it's a maturity level issue. You're dating somebody who obviously isn't on your same level. You could have nothing in common with them. It's clear that your only value is their body. You're not going to have like a positive, long-term loving relationship with somebody who's literally not on your level intellectually. That's the reality. And that's why I think Andrew Tate disrespects women, because he dates the worst of them. Young people are annoying and they're dumb. I'm not trying to be rude, but it's kind of true. You have to get, you have to get older and you have to go through more experience to understand different things. You're not going to really be able to build, you're not going to be able to find the value of a good wife and a good mother, and, you know, somebody who's good for community in a 19-year-old girl or a 19-year-old boy. Obviously, you know, especially if you're 30-something. And I think that Andrew dates younger girls, and that's fine, but then he thinks that that's how all younger girls are. He's like, well, I date young girls, and he's like, well, he only dates young girls, and then because they're kind of dumb, he thinks all women are dumb, right? Date somebody on your level. Kind of like the whole thing. It makes it a little easier.
Misogynist, am I? I don't think, first of the things she said, I don't even truly believe. If you're prepared to listen to me, I'll explain to you exactly why she's completely and utterly wrong. Okay. If you can go through the points again.
Well, do you think you're a misogynist?
Absolutely not. I'm not a misogynist on any level. This is one of those buzzwords they just throw at people randomly. Homophobic, racist, misogynist, they just throw it out at people.
What is your view of women?
I'm a realist.
What is your real view of women?
I absolutely utterly love women. I adore women. I have good relationships with women. Not a single woman has come up to me on the street since I've been canceled. Not a single one has said anything negative. Every single one of them has said positive things. You're a traditional male. I wish more men were like you. You understand your masculine roles. You understand what you're supposed to do. You understand you're supposed to protect women. You're exactly the kind of man.
Yeah, of course. I mean, sure, that's great. But that's not all women, we understand, right? Right? Just like people on the left can treat women like dumb fucking babies, you know, because that happens too. I think that's something that happens on the left more than anything else. Is like you'll have like a 19 or 20-year-old girl engage in a consensual relationship with an older guy, and then they'll act like she's a victim, right? They'll be like, oh my God, basically you're a rapist. You're older than her. She's a legal adult. So what? When it comes to a 19-year-old girl, she's just a baby that's still learning. But when it comes to like a 19-year-old boy, he's a rapist if he talks to like a 17-year-old girl, right? So it's interesting that like that difference in opinion when it comes to men versus women. Women are infantilized in our society, despite the fact that they mature faster. And that doesn't mean that we should treat them more mature, but like women tend to mature faster and men mature slower, yet somehow women are infantilized and men are just like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So, yeah. But that's in your sphere, for sure. Okay.
I'd be looking for. I've never had a negative interaction with a female ever since I've been dubbed the biggest misogynist in the world. Please let me finish. I'm sorry, Piers. Also, there's not been a single woman who's accused me of a crime, not a single woman who's accused me of rape, not a single woman who's come out and said anything from my entire past of 36 years I've done anything wrong ever. Anybody else with my level of fame, any footballer, any other movie star, at least has people who've come out and accused them of rape, X, Y, Z. I have no woman who's
Well, you did have that issue before, but I'm not saying that makes it true. I'm just saying that you did have that issue.
come out and ever said I've hurt her. No woman has come out and ever said I've done damage to her or been horrible to her. Everybody who ever interacted with me has said I've been a nice person. All of them. So this random Twitter nobody who seems to know so much is full of...
All right, you've responded to her
Very
tweet.
based.
Yeah,
Where is the line for you between masculinity, which I will always defend, and which I agree with? I think a lot of women like men to be masculine.
For sure.
And what has become known as toxic masculinity. And the reason I ask you is that you are engaged in that debate with men all the time. Where is the line for you where men shouldn't cross, where the behaviour should be kept within a line?
Please define toxic masculinity.
Well, you tell me what you think it crosses a line from being a masculine, good man to a bad man.
There's no such thing.
I mean, like, yeah, toxic masculinity exists. There are aspects of, I guess, masculinity that are toxic. It's pretty basic. Like, for instance, the concept that men shouldn't show emotion at all is a toxic masculine trait. It's also toxic femininity. I think that anything can be toxic in some capacity. And I think that, like, you know, like toxic femininity, I guess it would say that, like, you know, I mean, I guess I don't think about toxic femininity as much, but I guess it's some capacity of just leaning too much into, like, your femininity, which would be that infantilization of women. I would say that's a form of toxic femininity, is saying that women are so fragile and weak that, you know, they're basically babies out of fucking 19, even though they're literal adults, right? That is true. The problem I have, and I talked about this in my last segment with toxic masculinity, is that, like, let's talk about expressing your emotions properly. There's a good way to express your emotions as both a man and a woman, and men and women tend to express their emotions differently. I think that one of the problems I have with the concept of toxic masculinity from feminism is that it's a woman's perspective on how a man should act, and it's not entirely accurate. And there needs to be more of the male perspective in that conversation, right? So we talked about it before. It's good for men to express themselves before they, you know, get to a breaking point and start becoming destructive. Just like it is good for women. Women tend to cry more. They're a little bit sadder when they get frustrated. Their anger even manifests itself a bit differently. But, like, when a man gets angry, justifiably, you're not allowed to do that. That's what toxic feminism says. Men are not allowed to be angry, and they'll shame men that do get angry. And you might be like, yeah, of course, but no, men express themselves in anger. Men should be able to get angry. It's about having the proper type of anger, getting angry in a proper way. Excuse me, getting angry in a more proper capacity, right? Regulating that anger. Watch Elliot Hull said he was going a bit crazy, but what was his advice for getting when you get angry? You know, kind of like shake around a little bit. Go downstairs, maybe yell, get frustrated, release that anger in a positive way, shake yourself out, work out. These are ways to do it. And I just feel like that's one of the problems when it comes to how we talk about toxic masculinity, is it doesn't say, like, hey, express yourself. It says, like, hey, don't have the male experience in your way that you get frustrated sometimes. And that's a big part. And I think a lot of men would be like, that makes sense to me. It's okay. You don't have to fucking cry. There's very few reasons for it to cry in general. And, you know, again, estrogen is associated with crying, so I can understand why women cry more. That's totally fine with me. You shouldn't really be crying about everything as a man. Your father dies, your mother dies, of course. Your dog dies. Hell, fuck it. You know, I love my dog. I cried when my dog died. But it's okay to be, like, angry, right? You don't have to cry all the time. It's okay to be angry. Just don't break things. Don't become self-destructive. Don't hurt people around you. If you need time to take a deep breath and walk away from a situation, just sit there, do that. If you need, you know what I mean? Healthy coping mechanisms. I'm not going to say I'm perfect, because I obviously eat as one of my coping mechanisms. I'm not proud of that. But, you know, going around destroying things, breaking things, fighting, that's not the right way to do it, you know?
I think it's too much masculinity if it's genuinely masculine. Genuine masculinity is not out here to hurt people. It's absolutely the opposite. It's out here to protect. And when bad things happen...
But you just said that you can't make that argument, because you just said that women... it's okay for the Taliban to take away women's rights and that they should go fight themselves. Masculinity is not out here to protect. If you think that that's true, you're not advocating for, like, you're basically saying, since men are physically stronger than women, they should be able to bully women into doing whatever they want. That's your perspective. That's a toxically masculine idea. Like, that's where your toxic masculinity manifests itself. So you can't really make this argument here that you're not toxically masculine, because that's one of the ways. Who are you protecting by allowing men to roll over women and bully women? Nobody. So this is kind of a bullshit point he's making.
And they call traditionally masculine men. If you need a firefighter, you need a masculine man. When you call the police because of the problem you had, you want masculine men. And as soon as a woman or a man is in trouble, when you look for backup, you look for masculine men. And masculine men have a duty to provide and protect those they care about. We have a duty to do things we don't feel like doing because we know we're supposed to do them. And that's why we stayed in the Titanic and died. Those were masculine men.
Where did you get your views about this from?
This is what I grew up with. It's the family I grew up around. And
your father, your mother?
Yeah, and the world I lived in. And I think a lot of the things I'm saying now about masculinity and how people should act in the world how the world should function were considered completely normal and accepted by everybody only 20 years ago. I think the world.
The problem is that like the thing that you just said is perfectly normal and accepted, and nobody thinks negatively of that. It's when you use that idea. So you don't live by that value, though. You pretend to live by that value. That's just your pivot point. You back up to that. But again, you're advocating for men to be able to bully women out of going to school before. Oh, have the women go fight then, since they can't fight. You're just saying that like whoever's stronger should win in every case, even though like intellectual strength isn't about being physically strong. So, whatever.
It's just lost its mind.
Oh.
For me to stand up and say a man should protect a woman now gets to be called a misogynist and canceled. If I said that,
No, that's not how you feel. You don't think that men should protect women because again, I'm going to keep saying it because you think it's okay to bully women out of like spaces of getting intellectual growth. So you're not here to protect women at all. You're honestly like a bullshit artist. It's an unintelligent point. It's like it's fucking viciously unintelligent, the things that he's saying in this interview, and it's like come to like a full boil where we're at 32 minutes in and he's just exposed himself for being dumb as fuck. Like I don't know how else to say it, but like when you sit here and you justify the stripping of women's rights so that they can't go to fucking school, you're not having a conversation about like combat roles. You're saying that you shouldn't be able to go to school, and then say men should protect women. You're just dishonest. Like you just don't believe that. You're virtue signaling. You're saying what people want to hear. You're being a fucking loser. I don't know what else to tell you. It's just so childish.
10 years ago, everyone would say, duh. And what's funny is, everyone who argues against me and says men shouldn't protect women, especially all the feminists, if they were with their boyfriend and a man broke into their house, guess who they'd expect to go downstairs?
There's very few women who are saying that they don't want that. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. The strong, like, I mean, I don't know what you want to talk about. I don't know what you're saying. My wife is a very strong woman. She has her own career. She has, obviously, her own career. She cooks, cleans. She does a lot of shit. She's an incredible woman. She motivates me to be a better man. I'm obviously here for protection. Like that's one of the things that I provide, and she provides different types of benefits as well. Like we're equal. We just provide different things. She's a very strong woman that doesn't need a man, but like the fact that we're together makes her feel good. It makes her feel like a woman, just like she makes me feel like a man. You understand what I'm saying? Like if she didn't have me as a man, she would be perfectly fine. But the fact that I'm with her makes her feel like more of a woman. Same thing in reverse. I don't need a woman. Well, you need my wife, but you understand what I'm saying. Men don't need women, but they do need women, right? You know what I mean? You can cope and deal with it without somebody, but like it makes you feel like you can be safe, right? That's what it comes down to, brother.
Who do you think? Think they go themselves? Are they going to Afghanistan? No, we send men to do these things. So
Well, we send women.
But you just advocate against men doing that.
You have to generalize when you make points.
There are many courageous
exceptions.
people.
Exceptions do not disprove the rule.
No, but you've got to concede there are many courageous women serving in the armed forces.
Absolutely and utterly, completely correct. But by and large, traditionally, soldiers are men. Exceptions do not disprove the rule.
Well, it's not an exception. It's a fact that there are a lot of women now in the armed forces.
Correct. But if you were to take the average soldier, they are a male. If you're allowed to say who's a male and who isn't nowadays, I'm assuming their gender, I apologize. If you were to take the average soldier, they're a male, which means that exceptions are the female soldiers, which because there's a lower percent of them, a lower probability. Exceptions do not disprove the rules. Men do the fighting. Right now in Ukraine, men cannot leave. Women are allowed to leave because men have to fight in the front line and women are allowed to go to Dubai. That is how it is.
What do you say to young men who come to you for advice, who feel lost, who don't really know where they fit into society?
I say that life as a man is exceptionally difficult. I say the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing about being a man is you're born without value. Society doesn't care about you. You're only going to be cared about based on how useful you are. You have the chance to build yourself up and become a superhero if you're prepared to do the hard work and be indefeasible.
That's for both men and women. We just have a different perception of what value is for both men and women. Value for men a lot of times is like your ability to provide. Absolutely 100%. Value for women is also your ability to provide in a different way. Men tend to provide security and money. Women tend to provide babies, honestly, and emotional security. Somebody to confide in. That's the traditional relationship that is supposed to be there. Like, you know, traditionally, and I don't believe in having to be in a traditional relationship, but a man goes out, he works, the woman cooks and cleans, takes care of the house, and home takes care of the babies. These are two equal positions that are just different. They're both very necessary roles, right? So women aren't born. I know that like a lot of times a lot of people in the male sphere say women are born with value and then they lose it, and men are born without value. We're both born without value. Well, a woman that doesn't know how to, in a traditional setting, cook and clean and take care of their man isn't going to be particularly or perceived as valuable. It's not just about their looks; it's about like the way they act as well, right? Everybody sees different types of value in different people. Obviously, I don't value more traditional ideas personally, but yeah, so
enough to never quit. But if you're going to stand around and wait for a handout, nobody's going to ever respect you. And I think that a lot of people have forgotten about how difficult and how competitive it is as a man. We're always in constant competition with each other. And it's your duty as a man to stand up and say, I want to be as important and strong and good-hearted and God-fearing as possible, and I need to work hard to achieve those things.
Dame Sheila Hancock says we've become too over-emotional as a society, crying too much about everything.
Maybe.
She got a point?
She's completely right. And the dangerous thing about overly emotional men is that they're dangerous. They're genuinely dangerous. This is what's crazy.
I think overly emotional anybody's dangerous, even women. You know what I mean? It's just not good to be overly emotional. You need to regulate your emotions, even if they're different. You still need to regulate those emotions. So, I mean, I guess I tend to agree. I don't know why we have to gender it, you know. But okay.
People who talk about toxic masculinity and how bad it is for men to be traditionally masculine. A traditionally masculine man does things he doesn't feel like doing because it is his duty to do them. He charges into the building because it is his duty, not because he feels like it, because it is his duty. We're now teaching the new generation of men that they don't have duty and they can just act on their feelings and act how they feel.
Hey, tell Sneeko that, because Sneeko thinks what it means to be a real man is to not have any level of responsibility, right?
And they don't have to act as a man should. Do you know what happens when you get men who just act how they feel? You get school shooters, you get violence, you get rapists. Men who do not control their emotions are dangerous. If you find a man who is stoic, he's not going to hurt.
I think it's a little ironic that you're praising Genghis Khan for conquesting women and basically raping them, and then saying that you're going to get more rapists. You know what I mean? Like, come on, you got to think about that a little better. It's kind of dunked on yourself a little there, but okay.
Hurt people. He's going to sit and think about his actions very carefully, and he's going to be a good man who protects and provides for his family. You find a man who just acts out on impulse and does whatever he feels like, you're going to find a dangerous man. Sure. Sitting here telling men to cry more and act with their feelings, and it's okay to feel this way, that way, etc., and have no self-control. That is why we have the problems we have in the world. Absolutely not wrong.
I don't think anybody's actually teaching them that. I think that the fact that we don't have a lot of fathers in the household, that we have shitty parents, is probably a bigger issue than anything else, but okay.
So when they talk about toxic masculinity, they have it completely inversed on its head, completely and utterly wrong. We need to be teaching stoicism. We need to be teaching young men to understand that the world is very, very difficult. It's hard to be a man. You're going to feel bad sometimes.
It's hard to be a person.
You just suck it up and perform.
Yeah, but okay, sure.
Anyway, not to sit there and cry your eyes out or blame other people.
Tough being a woman
out.
too in modern society.
It's certainly tough being a woman, but I'm not a woman, so why would I speak on issues I do not understand? I'm a man.
You can feel
because the problem here is that it's one thing to say like, hey, I'm not a woman, so I can't understand a woman's perspective or advocate or tell you or explain to you the nuances of like what's going on with women, versus being very predominant about how hard it is to be a man, which really just without bringing up women, it's like, yeah, it's hard to be both, but I'm a man. He wouldn't have brought that up without Piers, and it comes off, maybe he didn't mean this, and I'll be generous, it comes off as like men have it harder than women, and I think that men and women have it equally hard in different ways. I think that's a better way to look at it. Yeah, so stoicism I think is overall good. It says the endurance of pain, hardship without the display of feelings and without complaint. There's a good level of that to an extent, but you cannot fully be stoic. I would say I'm a pretty stoic guy, but like I express myself to my wife. She respects me. I don't go, oh, babe, I'm having a rough day. I'll express it to her in a way that's not me crying like a bitch. Hey, babe, I'm having a hard day today. I just need you to sit down and we need to talk about it. It's not that big of a deal. She doesn't lose respect for me. My wife has tremendous respect for me. I know that. Just like I have tremendous respect for my wife. People I know always say, Pop, I'm tired of you talking about your wife. Then criticize the manosphere content. Because every single fucking day, you have manosphere people coming out here disrespecting women and treating them like fucking rabid animals. Or excuse me, treating men like rabid animals who just need to go and fucking come into everything. And treating women like fucking objects. And all I'm telling you, like, realistically, is that, like, I'm telling you what a relationship is supposed to be like. Go criticize them for talking shit about women all the time instead of criticizing me for talking positively of my fucking positive relationship. Anyway, point is that it's good to be stoic like to the public, but you need to have your space to be able to let it out. Doesn't mean you have to fucking cry because you had a bad day as a man. It's good to be able to sit down and talk to your partner, your spouse, whoever it is.
Empathy for women.
I feel empathy, certainly, but I do not understand their issues.
See, a lot of men come up to me and they admire you. I've got to say, a lot of women I've spoken to don't admire. They think you represent misogyny. They think when they hear you not commit to saying the Taliban shouldn't be banning women from university education, well, why can't he just say that's wrong?
Well, firstly, that's not my experience. I experience the absolute and utter opposite of that. Secondly, it's because it's a moral point I'm making. My moral point is I speak on things I understand. I speak on experiences I've had.
Yeah, but you believe in
I don't know if he does that, but okay.
Policy.
I speak on subjects I know intimately. I do not feel qualified. I'm a realist, and I do not feel qualified to sit and discuss the gender laws in Afghanistan. I have not been to Afghanistan. I have not researched the subject thoroughly. I'm not going to...
You don't need to have a deep understanding of this to understand that women should be able to go to school. Yeah, it's just bro, come on. He's trying to make he's playing this very dishonest game where he's trying to make it seem like it's this super deep conversation. He asked you if you think women should be able to go to university, which I think is college, but like let's just say go to school. You're having should women be able to go to school? You should be able to be like, yeah, I think that's fair. This isn't a deep intellectual conversation. It's just very basic, and you're just not engaging with it.
Going to sit here and say how the Taliban should be running their country. It's nothing to do with me. I find it quite flattering, Piers, that although, I understand I'm monumentally influential, the most Google man on earth, etc., I find it very flattering that you think I have some kind of control over the domestic policy of Afghanistan. But I assure you I don't. I don't.
You don't. But you do have control over what you say and what you advocate for. And when you don't disavow things like this, it comes off as support. And there's a lot of people who are listening to you going like, yeah, I do believe in this fundamental regressive ideology when it comes to women. You're just allowing people to feel comfortable in that feeling. That's the problem that arises is arisen here. Right? You understand what I'm saying? That's your issue there.
No,
So it's nothing to do
I'm
with
not asking you to have a view on having influence of a domestic policy. I'm sure the Taliban couldn't give a stuff what either of us say about it. It's just curious to me that it's an easy win for you to make women think you're not anti them, to say that when they're not given equality, as the women in Afghanistan clearly are not, because they're not allowed to go to university now as of today, that is clearly unequal, unfair. We should all be able to agree that that is wrong.
Well, certainly as a realist.
Even you, tough guy, Andrew.
It's not tough guy. I am a professional. As a professional, I can state that yes, it is not equal. Yes, it is not fair. That is obvious for anybody. I'm not saying those things are not true. What I'm saying is it's nothing to do with me.
Right, okay, but you made a concession you think is wrong. Then.
I said it's unequal and it's unfair.
That's the first time that he's ever said it was unequal and unfair. Like if he had said that if he had said, this wasn't his point, this is the problem, is it's such a downplay. If he had said, listen, I think it's unequal, I think it's unfair, but this is beyond me, that's fine. That's not what he originally said. He wasn't making a nuanced point. It comes off as an incredible defense, right? Maybe he's just dog whistling to people. I don't know what to tell you, because so dog whistling is basically, you're basically, it's such a weird thing to define, but it's basically you're saying something that could be interpreted differently based on the person that's hearing it. So for somebody who's more misogynistic, and maybe he doesn't mean this, but this is how it will be perceived. Maybe let's be really generous and say Andrew Tate actually believes, like, listen, I think women should actually, which he should just say, I think women should absolutely have the access to education, which he still hasn't said very explicitly. He's being very vague. If he had said, I think women should have access to education, but this is a country that I am not part of and I have no control over it, and so it's not something that I want to have a conversation about. Respectable, but that's very assertive about what he thinks. What he's saying is like, I think it's unfair, but I think equality is unfair. He's also made it a very heavy point to his audience that equality, that men and women aren't equal. So this doesn't actually speak negatively. If I say something is unequal, you'll be like, yeah, that means that it's unfair. If Andrew Tate says something is unequal, if you're a fan of him, you're going to understand that he's interpreting it as in like men and women aren't equal. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that it's unequal. This is where it becomes like a dog whistle, where for like some average, so there's like some average everyday people can interpret it like, oh yeah, see, he's disavowing it. Whereas a lot of his audience will be like, oh no, that's not bad, because unequal isn't bad. Men and women aren't equal, because they're not. But it's about the equality. You know that I'm speaking to equality in opportunity. Women should have the equality of opportunity. He's not speaking to the equality of opportunity. He just thinks that men and women aren't equal, right? You understand?
So wrong.
Well,
dog whistling,
perhaps.
yeah.
Force yourself, Andrew.
No, perhaps it's wrong under certain moral guidelines, but under the moral guidelines which are currently in charge of the jurisdiction of Afghanistan, they don't believe it's wrong. It's nothing to do with me.
Well,
I'm not going to sit here and tell other countries how to run their laws. I'm going to live in societies
Yeah,
with laws.
he's being kind of a coward about the perspective, to be honest with you. Just be like, I think it's totally fine, or say that it's good or bad. Just say that, but he won't. He's being kind of a pussy about it. I'm not trying to be rude, but
You know what? I'll take unfair and unequal.
Sure.
Because that's self-explanatory. We're going to have a game of chess in a minute after the break, because you are a very good chess player. I can hold my own with a chessboard. Your father was a chess international master, in fact. And we're going to have a 5-minute game of speed chess.
damn, he was giving us that light skin
Was
eye
a
there.
chess
Damn, that's that light skin look, baby. Ha ha! I just learned that phrase today. Am I allowed to say that as a? Am I light? I'm not light skin. I'm white. Is that racist? I think we're okay. Guys.
international master, in fact. And we're going to have a 5-minute game of speed chess. Winner takes all, Mr. Tate. Welcome back to Pittsburgh on Sense. Andrew Tate is still here. Andrew's father was an American chess international master, and his son's pretty good at it too. Well, I can hold my own. I was my school chess champion. And with 5 minutes left on the programme, we're going to have a game of speed chess. Winner takes all. All right, well, you're white. Off you go. Off we go. 5 minutes, go.
That's racist, Piers. Cancel Piers Morgan.
What?
Okay.
Are you good, Piers?
Well,
Are you going to destroy me?
Clearly from this opening, better than you.
Let's see, I guess. Aren't we?
I guess we'll watch it in case they have a relevant conversation. Like, I'll put it on speed. Like, I don't.
Be aggressive, shall we?
Okay. They're just playing chess. I haven't played in a very long time.
School chess champion, eh?
It's tense.
Certainly.
Lennox Lewis was better than you.
Do you think that Piers like did a lot of practicing so he could beat Andrew?
Was he?
Well, he beat you 39 times out of 40. Check.
Yeah, he is pretty good at the game, I heard.
Time to get aggressive with you, Mr. Tate. Show you a bit of toxic chess masculinity.
Well, the world's been pretty aggressive with me lately, Piers, so I'm used to it. It's fine.
Okay.
Oops, apologize.
How long we got?
Why do you think the Queen?
3:45.
Why do you think the Queen gets to jump across the board and the King doesn't?
Because it's sexist.
The game of chess is sexist. Perhaps it reflects life, Piers. Have you ever thought that when you look at a yacht in Dubai?
You're running out of time.
Maybe.
Stop stalling. I know what
Fine,
you're
I'll
doing.
take her.
Oh, God!
I'll take her Queen.
Damn it.
I was trying to give you a little speech here. You want to listen to it?
No,
I'm
I
trying to tell you
don't.
when you see a yacht in Dubai, the girl just gets an Instagram invite, gets to jump right on board, she gets to run across the board and do everything.
I guess it's an interesting question. I don't know.
She wants, but the man is to get there a square at a time. The man had to buy that yacht. That's the difference between being a man and being a woman. That's why the queen gets
You
to
know
do
what?
what she does.
A chivalrous man just always lets ladies go first.
I don't think that when chess was created there was yachts involved, but like that's an interesting question.
Life and chess
Why don't
reflect.
you go first?
Life and chess reflect, Piers.
I made a catastrophic error, but I'm bouncing back.
Let's see. I always accidentally take someone's shape.
3 minutes.
I don't even mean to.
Why is the queen in chess so powerful? The queen's the most powerful piece in the game of chess. It can move any. Okay, let me see if I can look into that.
It's just like, oops.
You need to stop knocking my pieces over like some.
Dog.
Yeah, exactly. He's not getting in my head. They're talking to me saying you're getting in my head.
How do you think chess reflects life?
I think that it's all about strategy.
Correct.
That if you're good at chess, you can be good at pretty much anything because it's about thinking ahead, it's about planning, it's about relentless practice.
And you know what else is beautiful about chess? If you lose, somewhere you made a mistake. There's no luck.
Absolutely right.
In chess, even if it's the smallest mistake, somewhere it was your fault. It teaches absolute self-accountability, which
Yep.
is something that we need a lot more of in the world today.
That is true.
And that's why chess is so important. You can take my knight if you want. You don't want it? Why do you want my knight?
Because I'm playing a long game.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted it. I'm gonna leave it there in case you take it anyway.
Okay.
I'm gonna go.
I don't know what you want me to do. I'm not going to do it. Actually, I will do it.
Okay. Check. 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 Check.
How long? I need to buy some time here. I need to buy some time. This is really playing well on radio, by the way.
I'll have that. Thank
Damn
you.
it.
Okay, so the one I'm looking around. Apparently, chess historians believe that the piece we call today was not actually called the queen originally. It was originally called the furs or advisor. Shockingly, it was one of the weakest pieces on the board as it could only move one square diagonally. This means the game of chess existed without the queen for so many years. In the 15th century, history took some turns. The game of chess moved into European countries, and several revisions were made to the existing chessers. More importantly, revisions were made to the piece which we know as the queen piece. So what happened in the medieval times that prompted these changes? Many chess historians believe that Murray, HJR, and some other guy believe the rise of chess queens is deeply connected to the rise of female monarchs in Europe. In other words, the queen's rise on the board related to historical events that happened around the 15th century. It's interesting because I was watching Just Pearly Things, and they were talking about how there was some fucking lefty little loser talking about how women made better leaders, and then she's like, well, yeah, but did you know that women actually started more wars? And so it prompted me to be like, okay, I have to look into this. It was actually women in England, and from like the 15th to the 19th century. It was over like a 500 or 15th to the 20th century or something, or 14th to 19th century, 500-year period, which would gravitate in this time, where, yeah, in that specific 500-year period, women did engage in more wars. They were also more successful at those wars. So if he looked into that statistic, he could be like, well, actually, they were better at the war. So maybe, and I don't think that women are better leaders than men. I don't think men are better leaders than women. I think that there are different skill sets that individuals can have that can be very beneficial to a leadership position, and they could coexist in a very positive way. You know? But it was very interesting. And so it seems like part of this has to do with the rise in very successful female leaders, and a lot of it isn't just because they're females. There was this interesting thing. There was so much information that I read, but it was something about how women in power would still marry, but their husbands, if the woman died, wouldn't be able to succeed them unless they were deemed a co-monarch in some capacity, which reduced or removed the motivation for those men to try to hurt their wives, because they wouldn't succeed them. They wouldn't become the predominant powerful person, which meant that they had a more positive alliance together. So you could speculate that the reason why these women were these queens were so good at their job is because they had deep trust in somebody that they could confide in, and they were able to operate in very positive military ways, where the man was able to use his strength as a king to be able to appeal to other kings who may be a little bit more sexist, and et cetera, et cetera. It's a very interesting conversation, very interesting read. I'll see if I can find the sources and put it in the video if I remember. So that might be where it comes from, right? Isn't that so interesting? I don't think it's this magical shit fart that Andrew Tate is advocating for. It seems like a rather non-nuanced understanding of the situation. Seems to have more of the rise of female leaders in England. So.
I'm screwed.
Don't say that.
How long have I got? 1 minute 12?
Believe in yourself.
Oh, I never ever give up.
Believe in yourself.
I do believe myself, thank you.
Self-belief is important.
I do believe myself, but this has not gone well. You're quite good at chess, I'll give you that.
Yeah, well, in the chessboard of life, I've done pretty good. I've done okay. Check.
The question is, can you beat me in time? You've only got 50 seconds.
Check. That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
Let's see. Mate and 2 Piers. Yeah, you can have that. Doesn't matter. Mate 2. Check. Mate. Good. Good game, sir.
Well played. 25 seconds away from safety. Okay, well, Andrew Tate, I'll give you something. You're good at chess.
Thank you.
You have to be. You just beat me.
I know you're internationally
What
renowned.
has chess taught you about life, quickly?
I can teach you a lot of things. Like I said about the queen being able to run around the board, the king having to move a square at a time, about the fact you think, hey, absolutely everything's your fault. But there is a saying, which is actually one of my favorite sayings in the world. It said, a well-played game of chess is a sign of...
It's very interesting that Andrew Tate doesn't have... He clearly didn't look into the historical aspect of chess in any capacity. It was like a 5-minute Google search for me to be able to find this. You could have looked it up and done some research. And it's part of his life in a very profound way, so you think he would be able to do that. But he's decided to assign it to mean that like women and men are unequal and women have an easier time in life than men. So it's very interesting that he's assigned a victimhood complex to men while advocating against victimhood complexes. Actually makes me shit fart and cum at the same time.
Gentlemen, but an expertly played game of chess is the sign of a wasted life, and it's kind of sad.
I played Lennox Lewis on Celebrity Apprentice 39 times out of 40 in America years ago, and he beat me 39 times out of 40 on me. And I was amazed. He was taught by his mum, but he was all about the way he fought, the way he boxed, was all down to the way he played chess.
Yeah, chess.
It was all about looking ahead, getting ahead of your opponent, planning punches, all that kind of thing.
Chess absolutely reflects life, and even I say this now in my business meetings with my team. A lot of the problem in the world today, especially with teams and businesses, etc., everyone wants to be the king. But if you want to have a team, if you want to have a side that wins, if you want to win a game of chess, everybody has to know their role and do their role effectively. There can be a king and a rook and a pawn and a bishop and a knight, and everyone does everything correctly. And when that happens, you have a very formidable board and you're hard to beat. And chess reflects life absolutely. It's something I do every single day.
What kind of man was your father?
He was the greatest man on the face of the planet. But luckily he had me, and now in the natural order of the universe, he is gone, and I am here, and I carry his name, and it is my duty to bring honor to him. And this is one of the greatest things about achievement, because achievement honors your ancestors. People talk about my father because of how successful I am, and people will talk about me into eternity, even after my death, because of how successful my son will be. This is the great thing about achievement. It's an honor to your ancestors.
What would he have made of your...
Yeah, like I said, Andrew Tate's a great man, but he's not a good man. And that's the thing. The world's best men, all the world's good men that drive society forward in a positive direction, will not be remembered. You'll be remembered for like 2 generations. Great men will be remembered forever. And I think that speaks to the strength of being a good man, that you don't need to generate world-renowned achievements just to immortalize your doings. You're more focused in immortalizing the positive message of your bloodline and your family. It's better to be a good man than a great man. I'm just telling you.
Success, your father.
He would be extremely underwhelmed by it because he always expected it of me. I am Emory Andrew Tate III. I can do whatever I put my mind to. And he would be like, well, of course, you decided you wanted to become the most famous man on the planet. It took you a few months, of course.
Does your mother ever do what my mother does and occasionally go, I think you went too far there?
My mother has absolute trust in my abilities and capabilities. She says, be careful, do your best, but you are the most capable and competent man on the planet. And
that wasn't the question.
Does your mother actually say those words to you? That's a little bizarre the way that she talks to you, but okay.
That's what she says. She says, be careful.
Does she ever say you shouldn't have said that?
Nah, she knows better than that.
Really?
No, never. She says, just be careful. You know what you're doing. It's kind of hard.
I mean, she knows better than that. My mother's given me advice before. Said that, relax, chill out, blah, blah, blah. Sure, I think it's fair.
Hard to argue against me, and this is what my haters seem to struggle with. It's hard to argue against a person who is monumentally successful in every single human metric that can possibly be measured. This is why young men respect me so much.
Would you ever tell your mother what to do?
They want to be my life.
You ever tell her what to do?
I don't need to. She's a full-grown woman.
Would you ever tell?
I think that the fact that people look to Andrew Tate, the biggest thing that men look to is how financially successful and sexually successful he is. Which, listen, you want financial success, and obviously, you want to fuck. Let's be real. But there's an abundance of it in Tate that's unnecessary to the common man. And it just speaks to the fact that a lot of young boys are so desperate for hyper success that's going to fail them because you can't all achieve that hyper success, that they're destroying themselves. Like, think about it. Everybody wants to be a fucking TikTok star now. Everybody wants their 10 seconds of fame to turn into like the easiest job in the entire world. That's kind of how people are with Andrew Tate. They want to be like Andrew Tate. That's why you're seeing so many people like Sneeko copying his model of like, oh, let me sell some bullshit fucking course to them, and like have charged them $50 a month for Discord posts that are not particularly profound.
Tell her what to do.
I would give her my advice if she asked for it.
You say you can't leave the home, you can't drive, all those things you joke about? Or?
I'd give her my opinion. I would say perhaps you should move house now, or perhaps that's not safe. Or yeah, I would absolutely, because I'm responsible for her safety. And when you're responsible for somebody's safety, you have an opinion, and you need to have a firm opinion on that subject. So completely. For any woman I'm responsible for her safety, I will sit and say that's an unsafe thing to do.
How much are you worth?
I'm a billionaire by now.
Dollars or pounds?
About dollars. We're not in pounds yet, but we'll get there.
So what to do?
Yeah, we have a little bit of work to do. But
finally, I know you don't know anything about football, carry even less, but greatest of all time, Ronaldo or Messi?
They're both two very hardworking men. I have absolute respect for anybody on earth who dedicates themselves to this.
Andrew Tate, thank you very much indeed. That's it for tonight. Keep it uncensored like it was tonight.
All right, that was a hell of a segment, huh? It's always fun to talk about men's shit all the time. You know what I mean? I think that you have to compromise being goodness to become great in a lot of cases. People ever hear people talk about selling your soul in order to You ever hear people talk about having to sell their soul, stepping on other people just to be able to build yourself up? That's kind of what you're talking about. You know, good men won't compromise their moral values just for a little bit more success. They'll keep on keeping on, just as Joe Berderta said.
I want Papa Gut to pee on my face, but just as a friend. There's nothing weird about that. I want him to pee on my face.